Eve Stratford was born in Dortmund, West Germany in 1953. Her mother was German and met her father, an English medic in the Royal Army Medical Corps in the 1940s. As a youth, Stratford won 3 beauty contests in Germany. The family later moved around the world during Stratford's childhood, eventually settling in Aldershot, Hampshire. In 1972, she moved with her boyfriend Tony Priest to Leighton, North East London. At the time of her death, Stratford was a Playboy Club bunny in Park Lane. She'd started work at the club in 1973, recommended by a friend. She lived a glamorous lifestyle, socialising with others, including famous figures such as Sid James and Eric Morecambe, and knew many other high-profile individuals. In March 1975, only a few days before she was killed, Stratford appeared on the front cover of Mayfair magazine, an adult magazine for men, as the Girl of the Month. She desperately wanted to become a model, and when she was turned down to appear in Playboy's American magazine, she jumped at the chance to feature in Mayfair, its British top-shelf rival. Eve posed topless on the front cover as Miss March for the Spring Bonanza issue, branded as the most classic blonde we've ever uncovered. She would later be suspended for breach of contract by her club since she had posed for a rival publication. The magazine was said to be on the top shelf of every newsagent in March that year. Police would later conclude that the magazine cover had likely enticed her killer. After she was suspended, Eve went home to her flat in Leighton, East London, which she shared with her boyfriend, Tony Priest. Tony was a musician who began dating Eve in 1972, and the pair started living together in a room in a rented upstairs maisonette with a mattress on the floor for a bed. The flat had 4 bedrooms, and each one was occupied for a while by members of Tony's band. One band member and his girlfriend had moved out of the flat in early 1974, and the band had finally split around the time of Eve's 21st birthday. Tony and one of the others began working as forklift truck drivers, while the third remaining tenant joined another band. On Tuesday, the 18th of March 1975, Stratford was found dead by her partner at their flat at 61A Lyndhurst Drive. Her throat had been cut between 8 and 12 times from ear to ear. The attack was so savage that her head was almost severed, while her neck and face were extensively mutilated, with one detective stating it was one of the most horrific murder scenes they had ever seen. She was found partially unclothed, with a nylon stocking tied around one ankle, and her hands were bound with a scarf. She was dressed only in a pink bra and panties, and a flimsy blue nylon negligee open at the front. There was a strong suggestion she had been sexually assaulted, and semen was found indicating that she'd had sex shortly before her death. There was no sign of forced entry to the property, nor were there any signs of a struggle. A peculiar scent was left behind by her attacker in the room she was found. Police found that on the day of her death, Stratford had visited Camden to see her agent and then went to a promotions consultancy in Bayswater. As far as detectives could tell, she had made the journey home on her own and was not seen with anybody else. She began to travel home at 3:30 p.m. and walked from Leytonstone Tube Station to her flat, last being seen by a neighbour walking towards her residence while wearing a floppy hat and holding some dried flowers. At 4:30 p.m, the woman living below her flat heard a male and female voice talking, apparently calmly, followed by a thud, and then the sounds of footsteps. It was 5:20 p.m. when her boyfriend returned, to find her dead. Police were convinced that the magazine piece Stratford had appeared in the same month she died had lured her sexually motivated killer to her. They believed that the killer had traced her address and then attacked her. That month's magazine featured naked photo shoots of her alongside an interview in which she concluded that she liked to be submissive sexually. Police also noted that although she had 3 housemates, she said in the article that she lived alone with her cat. Detectives believed she may have been spotted by her killer and followed home to her flat before being murdered. The facts that there were no defensive wounds and no one had heard any screams or shouts suggested Stratford knew her killer, but it was also considered that she could have been terrified enough to simply comply with the attacker's demands. The bouquet of flowers she was seen carrying home was found discarded in the hallway of the apartment ground floor entrance, and not up in her first floor room, suggesting that she was confronted by her killer almost immediately after entering the house. It was also observed that the bouquet of dried flowers were similar to those Stratford had posed with in the Mayfair magazine cover. Other bunny girls at Stratford's club were interviewed, and it emerged that some had received obscene phone calls in the lead-up to the murder. One girl had received death threats following her own nude centrefold in Mayfair. Detectives found that Stratford had herself received a number of intrusive phone calls in the days leading up to her death. It was also discovered that she had received 3 mysterious phone calls on the very day she died. Each time she had answered the phone, the caller said nothing and then cut the line dead. Searches of nearby gardens, dustbins and drains following Stratford's murder failed to find the murder weapon, but did uncover a badly torn copy of the magazine which had featured Stratford days before her death, although other pornographic magazines were also found there. 2 photophonic pictures were released by detectives of 2 men seen in the vicinity of the murder site that day, which officers wished to speak to. One was described as being in his late 30s or early 40s of medium height. The other was about the same age but taller and with thick black wavy hair. Nothing came of these photophonic appeals. Numerous people were questioned after the murder, from celebrities to customers, and there was one man that the police believed was the #1 suspect at the time. A man who was known to be a pimp and an underworld fixer. For years the police had him in their sights, but in 2009, when he passed away, his family provided a DNA sample that cleared his name, so the police would be back to square one. By 1976, all leads had been exhausted by the original Stratford investigation team, and the murder inquiry was wound down. Unbeknown to the police at this time, the killer would strike again later that year. 16-year-old schoolgirl Lynne Weedon was hit over the head with a blunt object and raped on the 3rd of September 1975, 6 months after Stratford's murder and on the other side of London. That night she had gone out to celebrate her O-level results with friends at the Elm Tree pub on New Heston Road, near to where she lived. She began to travel home at 11 p.m, parting company with her friends on the Great West Road before crossing over and continuing their journey home on her own through an alleyway named Short Hedges. Weedon had previously vowed never to use the alleyway after dark, as it was frequented by prowlers, but on this night she decided to take the shortcut. In this alleyway at approximately 11:20 p.m, she was struck over the head with a heavy object similar to a piece of lead pipe, fracturing her skull. Her attacker then lifted her over gates and into the grounds of a power substation, before dragging her out of sight and raping her. She was discovered the next morning by the caretaker of the neighbouring school, and despite her injuries was still alive. However, she died a week later in hospital without regaining consciousness. Around the time of the murder, a man out walking his dog had seen a white male walking down the alleyway. Other witnesses described seeing a man, believed to be the same individual, running across the Great West Road into the alleyway. It is believed that this man was Weedon's attacker. In 2004, the Weedon investigation was reopened, and in 2007, new DNA technology unexpectedly showed that the murders of Stratford and Weedon were committed by the same person. On the surface, there was nothing to connect the two murders. One victim lived a wild, glamorous lifestyle and was found dead in her East London bedroom. The other was a 15-year-old schoolgirl who was bludgeoned as she walked home from a night out with friends in the west of the capital 6 months later. As a result of the link, Stratford's case was reopened. 16 of the main suspects in the murders had their DNA taken, but none matched that of the killers. Both cases were featured in September 2007 on the BBC Crime Watch programme, where DCI Andy Mortimer stated that without a shadow of a doubt, both murders were sexually motivated. It was noted that the attacker had on both occasions taken the weapon to the scene before taking it away with him, clearly indicating that they were premeditated attacks for sexual motivation. Mortimer said that it was very unlikely that the killer had only committed these two murders and never committed another crime ever again, stating that the attacker probably committed offences both before and after the attacks. Links have also been suggested between Weedon's and Stratford's murders and those of 3 other women, including that of Patsy Morris, a fellow schoolgirl who was killed less than 3 miles away from Weedon's murder in 1980. Morris, 14, had gone missing from the area on the 16th of June, and 2 days later was found half naked and face down in undergrowth. The site of Weedon's murder remains largely unchanged today. The alleyway is now commonly referred to as School Walk and is used by those walking to the adjacent Lambton School.